rally in Rio de Janeiro. Also, we stress this, Lula da Silva held a new rally in Uruguay. Students occupied the Education Ministry headquarters in rejection of the sector reform promoted by President Luis Lacalle Pou. And in South Sudan, more than 90,000 people have been affected by the flooding. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. In Brazil, presidential candidate Luis Inácio Lula da Silva held a new mass rally in Rio de Janeiro in preparation for October 30th runoff elections. The presidential candidate for the Workers' Party made a tour of the Estrada do Itarare. There, Lula da Silva talked with the city's community leaders together with Mayor Eduardo Paes. During the meeting, Lula affirmed that if elected president, he will create committees so that the people of the favelas can help decide what the government will do. The candidate also promised to create formal jobs and guarantee benefits to small business persons so that they can grow again. For his part, Jair Bolsonaro visited the Basilica of Our Lady Aparecida to pay homage to the saint on her feast day. According to local media, the far-right candidate arrived at the Catholic sanctuary located in the city of Aparecida on Wednesday to attend the Mass celebrated in the name of the country's saint. Bolsonaro's presence at the Basilica caused a stir among those present and was labeled as an opportunistic for attending this religious event in the middle of the campaign that will define the country's future. Ecclesiastical authorities also expressed that using religion as a weapon in the middle of the electoral campaign is an exploitation of the faith to capture votes in the runoffs. The president of Argentina, Alberto Fernandez, met with representatives of Mapuche communities in the middle of the claims for the 3 women detained during the evictions of these communities in recent days. The hunger strike maintained by demonstrators sparked tensions within the government, and the resignation of the Minister of Women, Gender and Diversity of Argentina, Elizabeth Gómez Alcorta. In this regard, the head of state and representatives of Mapuche communities agreed to organize a space for dialogue to resolve the conflicts. President Fernandez reiterated his commitment to the communities to guarantee respect for indigenous cultures while stressing the need to advance in the dialogue to continue the multicultural construction. In Uruguay, students protested in rejection of the educational reform imposed by the government. Members of the Student Center of different educational institutions gathered in the headquarters of the Ministry of Education and Culture, where they were evicted by the police due to a request made by the educational authorities. The students pointed out that with this action, they demand an opening of negotiation spaces, of reforms and resources that affect the students' development, rejecting the proposal made by the government, in which they propose that they obtain their university degrees through a simple test.
We understood that this was the legitimate measure to claim before the silence of our demands. We were in the Senate committee, raising to the minister this issue for the title, and for the scholarships that they are supposedly going to give, accompanying this resolution, which are 80 million pesos that will be destined only to those who access this test, this title, which leaves us in inequality.
The president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, led on Wednesday the closing of the political and cultural minga of southwestern Colombia for the defense of life, territory, and peace. The Colombian head of state listened to the proposals of indigenous communities and other social sectors participated in the social gathering better known as Minga. According to the Regional Indigenous Council of Cauca, the community of Cauca is interested in the declarations of the government regarding the situation of violence and non-compliance with the peace agreements. After this meeting with indigenous people, President Pedro will travel to Santander de Quilichao, the department of Cauca, where he will lead a meeting with Afro communities and a human rights table. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro Moros led a ceremony to commemorate the 530th anniversary of indigenous resistance. The event took place in the capital city of Caracas, where representatives of indigenous peoples denounced the U.S. unilateral blockade and interference in the nation's internal affairs. During the rally, the Venezuelan president announced that between November 12th and the 14th, a national congress of the new era of indigenous movement will be held to create a joint work plan to follow up the title of ancestral lands.
We are going to have a great indigenous congress. We are going to invite international delegations from Bolivia, Paraguay, the Mapuche indigenous of Chile. So repressed in Chile, the Mapuche people, a greeting to the Mapuche people, so repressed, so tortured, and so martyred in Chile today. We are going to invite the indigenous people of Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, Panama, of all Central America, of Mexico, of the United States, of North America, the indigenous peoples, to the great indigenous congress of the new epoch.
We'll take a short break, but first, remember you can follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Striking French oil refinery employees voted on Wednesday to maintain blockades now in the third week, despite a government order for some of them to return to work in a bid to get fuel supplies flowing. The strike's action demand wage increases and have paralyzed 6 of France's 7 fuel refineries, causing gasoline and diesel shortages aggravated by panicked drivers. The government, which had already threatened to use emergency powers allowing it to order essential workers back to work, announced on Wednesday that it will implement them as the strikes entered their third week. Energy companies have affirmed that it will meet with all union representatives, having previously insisted that it will only meet with those who agreed to end the blockades.
Unfortunately, we have this government which is interfering in our movement, trying to prevent our strike movement by imposing and requesting striking employees to distribute fuel to all French petrol stations.
European Union energy ministers met in Prague on Wednesday to discuss their continued response to the bloc's energy crisis. During the meeting, Energy Commissioner Kadri Simpson said the EU had been preparing for the expected winter rise in demand by filling its storage 15% beyond the equivalent point this time last year. Czech Industry and Trade Minister Josef Sikela said the aim was to use the bloc's joint purchasing power to secure supplies. An agreement to energy prices is said to be announced and endorsed by the EU leaders at next week's summit. The 27-nation bloc has managed to fill gas reserves to 90%. European leaders have blocked and flocked to countries like Norway, Qatar, Azerbaijan, and especially those in North Africa, where Algeria has a pipeline running to Italy and another to Spain.
Volumes that Russia has cut, we have been able to replace.
We need to finally step up and implement the common purchasing of gas. We need to speak to our partner countries which supply Europe with gas in order to help bringing down the excessively high prices. We have to coordinate our demand reduction measures even more, and in particular we understand now much better how the spot market price for gas is influencing all the contracts, and we are confident that it is possible to find common ways to reduce prices, but at the same time to avoid rationing and to ensure that still market forces are in place to help us limiting demand.
David Icke, the governor of Hawaii, signed an executive order that aims to prevent other states from punishing residents who get an abortion in the islands. The order takes effect immediately and provokes other states to stop the sanctions against local doctors and nurses who provide such care. Icke's order directs the State Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs to work with professional licensure boards to ensure no one loses a license for providing reproductive health care so long as the services provided were lawful and consistent with standards for good professional practice in Hawaii.
To provide abortion in
China on Wednesday called for the United Kingdom to consider its relations with Beijing in an objective and national manner after reports that the British government was to officially declare China a threat for the first time.
China has always pursued an independent and peaceful foreign policy, and our development brings opportunities instead of threats or challenges to all countries in the world. We hope the new British government will look at China and China-UK relations objectively and rationally. It will lead nowhere to subscribe to the so-called China threat, which benefits no one and will eventually backfire.
Now we move on to other topics. During a United Nations meeting, the representative of Syria, Bassam Sebah, reiterated his support for Russia's actions in Ukraine and said the people in the Donbas region chose liberation.
Can you imagine, ladies and gentlemen, that each and every day we hear some Western countries pontificate about the need to hold people responsible for particular events occurring? Nonetheless, these countries themselves say nothing against the movement of nationalists in Ukraine. It goes without saying that NATO states have been involved. They've played the role of instigator. They've provided numerous promises to nationalist extremist movements in Ukraine. They promised to incorporate Ukraine into NATO in the European Union. They promised Ukraine military assistance if it upped its aggression against Russia. The United States and its allies, including NATO, clearly instrumentalized these policies. They have covered up the inhumane, discriminatory practices of the Kiev regime against the People's Republics of Donetsk and Lugansk and Russia, speaking peoples in the Donbass and elsewhere. These people have suffered terribly over the past 8 years, so they have finally chosen liberation. They chose to be part of a Russian Federation.
And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Uganda, Health Minister Jane Ruth Eisen reported a new Ebola outbreak has killed 19 people so far. The health official also said that the 5 medical staff members who contracted Ebola from treating the first confirmed cases have recovered and been discharged from an isolation unit in Entebbe. Ruth said the 5 affected districts have seen 54 cumulative confirmed cases, with 19 deaths and 20 recoveries. Ebola is often fatal, but vaccines and treatments are now available for hemorrhagic fever, which is transmitted to humans by infected animals.
Outbreak control. Epidemics begin, and my sincere hope that working together, we shall come up with practical solutions to better protect our communities and reduce any chances of cross-border spread of this virus in the spirit of African solutions for African problems. In the long term, as African governments, we need to bolster investment in research and development, innovation, and manufacturing of health tools such as vaccines, diagnostics, and essential therapeutics to address the wide spectrum of diseases that threaten us.
On Tuesday, India halted all production at the main factory of Maiden Pharmaceuticals near New Delhi after a WHO report that its cough syrups may be linked to the deaths of dozens of children in the Gambia. The recent incident, which has claimed the lives of 69 children, according to the WHO, has come a blow to the industry, whose exports more than doubled in the last decade to hit $24.5 billion fiscal year. Indian authorities inspected the Maiden factory in the state of Haryana 4 times this month and suspended all manufacturing activities on grounds of deficiencies found in location inspection. A top Indian health official, who declined to be named, said the government will not tolerate wrongdoing, but that it was important to find out what exactly happened in the Gambia.
So this one is not part of it?
8-9.
Now we move on to other topics. In South Sudan, some 909,000 people were affected by the floods in the territory. UN authorities report no fatalities and said the country is experiencing heavy flooding for the 4th consecutive year, affecting 9 of the nation's 10 states. They also reported the loss of livestock and the destruction of crops, as well as civilian infrastructure, homes, schools, and hospitals. In this context, authorities reported that the state of Unity in the north of the country has been the most affected by the floods, causing the rupture of dams, threatening 2 refugee camps and a UN base in the country. In Puerto Rico, thousands of people are still without electricity after the damage caused by Hurricane Fiona a month ago. The operating company Luma Energy warned that due to the damage caused by the hurricane to the generation fleet, there will be recurrent interruptions in the service during the next few months. The entity proposed a plan to mitigate its damages, which includes a program to rebuild the damaged generation plants and, in parallel, the acquisition and implementation of portable generators to face the energy deficit during the next 12 to 18 months. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.